95.6.
I'm really chuffed to welcome to the show Shirley Kitely. How are you, Shirley?
I'm fine, thank you.
This has took a bit of planning, this has, hasn't it? Was that nervous, Andy Neil? You're the nephew. You had to persuade her to come, didn't you?
No,
Oh, yeah, we've had a bit of coercion.
Between you and me on one side.
Well, I did tell you he was my toy boy, didn't I? So there you are.
Welcome to the show, Andy. I'm going to have a chat with you a bit later on, if I may.
Yeah.
About the story you put together from your dad's perspective. Who was your brother?
Yes, my brother John. He's only 17 months older than me, so we were good playmates.
Yeah, I bet you were.
And unfortunately he isn't with us now. But when we used to get together, we used to have quite a lot of stories to relate to one another, things that we remembered. And I have got, or did have, 3 other siblings. And one, Pamela, who's still with us, she's 13 years younger than I am. And she said to me one day, Shirley, why don't you jot down all these things? Yeah. She said, I'd love to read about them, because she wasn't around when John and I were together as children. And that's how it started. And I think I'm going back to about 2003. And it was something you just kept jotting down, adding a bit more. I would talk to John about things. He would correct me or add to things. And it sort of grew from that. And then you get to the point where you think, oh, that's enough now, just leave it on one side. And then I think I contacted you to tell you that I was writing this book and wondered whether you might find some of these stories of interest for your Brummaging magazine. And then you said to me very kindly, let me know about the book when it's finished and we'll take it from there. Well, time has gone on, so we're 2013 now. And then Andy produced a booklet that John had also written, but mainly through emails. Yeah. And he's collect them together after his dad passed away. Each member of the family had one of these. And reading through those stories, they were just hilarious. Now, I came from a very poor background, and Spring Hill area, as you probably know, Carl. It was after the war. I was born in 1940, so I was a war baby. War baby. And our play areas were bomb building sites, really. Yeah. And but we knew nothing other than that. That was where we played. But we had a lot of fun, and we made a lot of games that kept us occupied for days on end. You know, your mothers used to send you out for the day, and we'd always be playing somewhere where we had building out of rubble on the bomb building sites and whatever, swinging from trees. And those are the things I remember. I don't remember the fact that we were short of money because Dad hadn't got a very good job. He was very deaf. He could only do manual work. He had been in the army. And you sort of think, well, we were happy. Yeah. We were happy.
Was that because, like, our mum says that to me, she says, but we were all in the same boat, so we knew no difference.
That's right. And also, I came from a mother's family, was a large family, and her 2 youngest siblings were the similar age to John and I. Yeah. So we were always in a gang of children. We were always in the park, always somewhere. There was always something happening. Now, my husband doesn't remember anything or very little about his childhood. He's amazed at what I remember. And then, of course, reading John's emails and what he
stirred other memories up.
Yes.
Take me back then. So which street did you come out of, and tell me about your mum and dad?
Well, I was actually born in Spring Hill, not far from Spring Hill Library. Yeah. John was born in Rosebery Street, which was further towards Dudley Road. Yeah,
up in Brookfields.
He was born before me, yes. Is it Brookfield?
Yeah,
Ladywood?
Yeah, Brookfield's there.
Brookfield. Yeah. And then, so from when I was born, 1940 till 1950, that's where I lived, Spring Hill. Yeah. And everything happened around that area. I was always in Spring Hill Library. I love it's still there now.
Thanks to Cannon Power.
Yeah, absolutely wonderful place. And so apart from the Summerfield Park, which was further on, that was our area where we lived. Monument Road, the swimming baths there. not being far from the city centre, of course. We were always walking along Summer Hill into the town. That was my life. We never went on holidays. The first time I saw the sea was real when I was 15.
15. What was your feelings?
We didn't miss what we didn't have.
Tell me about, I mean, Springfield in them days was a very busy shopping road, wasn't it?
It was. Numerous shops. A lot of the names I remember of the shops, especially Verakia's, the ice cream shop. Everything was there. We didn't really need to go into Birmingham to shop. Everything was there.
Yeah.
A very busy area. But we lived in, it wasn't a back-to-back house, it was a terraced house. You went through up an entry, and then the houses were in the terrace, backed onto what was the, some factory, I've forgotten what it was now. So we weren't back-to-back houses, but it was a little community behind shops, and so everything happened there. And strange neighbours, all different types of people lived. There were 8 houses, and there were lots of happenings that went on in the terrace, and quite funny things, really. One incident was we had a neighbour, Mrs. Vickers, who didn't like children. We were always in trouble with her, moaning about everything. And Dad he was out of the army, he was at work, and Mrs. Vickers didn't like my mother, a bit of jealousy, I think. And apparently the rumour had gone round that my mother was meeting up with an American
Oh,
guy.
dear.
And
She was going up the casino.
It got out of hand, I can tell you. When, in those days, there was the women did the washing in brew houses.
That's right. And you had a different day, didn't you?
That's right, brew houses. I mean, why were they called brew houses? And Mum had was washing outside in the tub with the maid, and Mrs. Vickers was round there, and she was making some snidey comments, and my mother pushed her into the wash tub, didn't she? So there was such
uproar in the yard.
The consequences were that Mrs. Vickers took my mother to court, and she went off all dressed up nicely to court, the magistrate's court, and she was told to behave herself and not do anything like this again, but Mrs. Vickers had provoked her. So
6 of one and half a dozen of the other.
The kids, we all thought it was all this sort of thing was wonderful, you see, all these happenings. So this is where we got our laugh from, you see. So.
Tell me about your mum and dad.
Mum and Dad, because Mum had 5 children, eventually 5 children, 4 of us were born in Spring Hill. Pamela, my younger sister, she was born in Barford Road by Summerfield Park. And Dad came out of the army, and he was in the artillery, and he'd gone deaf. Now, we all assumed it was because of the artillery, the guns and everything, but we found out that there was a weakness in the family of deafness, and it's gone through to the children, Dad's children, my brother John, myself, my sister Brenda, and then it stopped there. The 2 younger ones, Pam and Alan, fine, but then it's gone through to the children, Andrew being John's child. I've only got one son, Darren. He's fine. But other children, it affected other children in the family. So we realised that Dad hadn't gone deaf through being in the artillery. It was in the family, which is... I think we've coped very well. Andy especially. I mean, I have my moments. I get a bit frustrated with it all. But even Andy, he's inherited his father's humour. He sees the funny side of everything. So I've told him to write a book because it will be hilarious with everything that goes on in his life.
Well, she's passed the book to you now. You've been chucked the ball. She thought, that's it, I've had enough talking. It's Andy's turn now.
I'll finish about Mum and Dad later.
Andy, tell me about your dad's emails to you and what they were about and why you brought them together in a book.
Well, I'm in the IT industry, so of course I got my dad into using computers. Right, I just thought he'd retired. It was the ideal thing to give him email, internet. You know what I mean? That was still dial up in those days, but I thought to myself, he will embrace this, because he was always keen on having the old Birmingham books, and I thought it would give him the chance to do a bit of research and things like that. He embraced it like you don't expect OAPs, really. I don't mean there's any offensive, but you don't. He really, really got stuck into it. He obviously started communicating emails, very important as well, because my other auntie, obviously, the sister Brenda, lived down in Paris in Wales, and she was very ill with MS, but she had access to a computer, and suddenly allowed to communicate with each other. And my dad started writing things down. Right, he'd start thinking about, he always had a great sense of humour, but he'd start writing down these little stories about, I suddenly remembered when I was little, and he'd write a little story about the spider or something that jumped out the hearth. He would then tell us stories about all the kind of mischievous things that I remember him telling us little stories when I was, 5 or 6, 7 or 8, telling us things. And he started writing them down, and it was a lot of this time he was actually just emailing Shirley and Brendan saying, "Do you remember when? Do you remember when?" Or writing this down. Unfortunately, of course, when he passed away, very, very, very suddenly, unexpected, and I grabbed the computer afterwards, and I sort of lifted all the emails off there and started, and I thought I can't let these go to waste. I know Shirley had probably got copies in her inbox and things like that, and I'd got copies of them. I thought I'd like to quite put these together in a kind of chronological order of how we not just sent them, and sometimes they were a bit all over the place and going different things, but to read them gave you a bit of an insight into, almost like Shirley's touched on. Actually, it's funny, but actually people had it really hard sometimes, and they made the best of things. You know what I mean? Some scandalous things that my father got up to would probably be judged quite harshly nowadays, I suppose. But people made them, but I found them hilarious. You know what I mean? The anecdotal stories that he got, and I put them into a little booklet. At my father's funeral, just afterwards, I gave copies to the family. I printed out, put them into little slipper binders. I've always had it on my website to download for a while, but Shirley's obviously had been encouraged, obviously, from reading these to go back into her book again with her different take on things. So I've now got involved with Shirley's side
of it as well. How much? I mean, it's a wonderful gift that your dad's left you, because so many of us, and to think you've got an aunt as well that's writing up her memories, because most of us say, "Oh, I wish I'd have asked them this, and I wish that." You've actually got that gift, haven't you, Andy?
Yeah, I mean, people keep saying, you should be a comedian and things like that. I probably got my dad's take on things, and and you have to see sometimes the funny thing. But I do occasionally, when reading through Shirley's book and saying, you see the humour in these things, but behind that, there is some quite hardships. Yeah. And probably, there's a lot of things we take for granted nowadays, and you're thinking, worrying about actually, Christmas, I was spoiled as a child, it was bikes and it was things like that. My father, you think, well...
An apple and orange and a shiny new penny and some nuts.
Yeah, people didn't have that, didn't have, masses of things. And you think, it goes on through each generation,
Have you learnt more about your dad through looking at your aunt's book?
Definitely. You're certainly the different take on the same story. Like you say, history is personal, and... my dad will have one take on things. Shirley, from a few years earlier, is looking up at that, being, a participant in that same experience, but seeing it from a different angle. Perspective. You know what I mean? So you're reading the same kind of story, and both takes are equally valid. But yeah, you realise that that my dad sort of took life on with a kind of, I'm going to make the most of this. I'm going to enjoy myself, even if it is a bit hard. You know what I mean?
It must have been very hard for you to lose John, but to have his memories from Andy and your memories of him is so powerful for you.
Yes, Carl. Andy has done me the world of good, because yes, I got a lot of memories, some sad memories, especially of his dad. But now we're laughing over the same things. And Andy will tell me things. Do you remember this Dad put it in the email. I said, oh, yes, there's something else. There's
Something will
always
click.
something else that you might have forgotten and I'm now remembering. And so I've had a lot of fun doing this. And I've chuckled while I've been typing.
And it sounds like as well it's helped you with your grief.
Yes, that's right. I did say to Andy earlier, Dad would be so proud of you because of what we've both achieved, really. Now, a lot of it is personal. It was our lives. And Carl, as you said, we were all in the same boat then in that area, that time. And so I make my family laugh, my younger sister, my brother. I've even got an aunt who I used to play with her. And she'll say to me, oh, I'd forgotten all about that, Shirley. That's great that you remember this. So
tell me about your mum, because we talked about your dad.
Mum worked hard. She, as I said, she ended up with 5 of us, Carl. And Dad, because of his job, he struggled. He didn't have a lot of money, but he was a hard worker. He set off most mornings at, say, 7, and he was back at 6:30. And his weekends, because of his deafness, and at that time he didn't have a hearing aid, he would go to the pub at the weekend. That was his escape, to be with people who understood him more, have a few pints. Now, sometimes he'd come back from the pub very happy, sometimes he wouldn't. And that was when us kids knew we'd got a scarper. But sometimes my mother did get the brunt of this. But it's only now, as an adult and the age I am, that I appreciate how it must have been difficult for both of them.
And your poor mum's copied it because she's the nearest to him. But
that's right.
She's got a hard enough life as it is, hasn't she?
Yes, she had. And it was a struggle. They lived day to day. And Dad, he obviously got very frustrated with things. When he was issued with his first hearing aid, it was a box type that used to hang around the neck.
I remember
and he couldn't get used to that. He said he could hear his own heart beating, drove him mad. There were a lot of arguments went on. We were very aware of this when we were children. Didn't mean to say we didn't love them any less. We did. Although I didn't really get on with my dad. I think we were too much alike. But they coped, they had to, and they certainly looked after us as children.
Do you understand your dad more now?
Yes. And you know, Carl, if only I could meet up with him again, things would be different. I know we'd have a different relationship.
But I bet as well as a youngster, seeing, and we can understand your dad now, but seeing how hard your mum works and then she's copping out, you were obviously taking your mum's side, weren't you?
Yes, you do, don't you?
Of course you do.
You always think your mother's the angel and father's the devil. But it was hard for both of them.
Yes, I can see that.
It really was hard for both of them. But the funny thing is, as we got older, you see, and we did side with Mum most of the time, of course, Andrew's dad was only 18 when he actually joined up for national service because he wasn't getting very well with Dad. He wanted to be out of the house. Yeah. Well, a big strapping fella, you see. So when he used to come home at weekends, if Dad was not performing as he should, there was John.
Sorted out.
So, it was...
But that was common in a lot of families. I mean, my nan did the same with my great-granddad. Really? Him and my gran fought. It's happened.
Yes.
And they fought physically. And eventually, when my Uncle Bill and Uncle George got old enough, they said, Dad...
That's it, enough's enough.
That's enough.
Yeah.
And our nan said, I ain't having no more babbies, you're sleeping downstairs from now on.
They did.
And my great-granddad had to go and sleep downstairs because our nan was the oldest wench. She said, I'm fed up of changing nappies because she was the eldest wench of 12.
So this is how it was.
Hard days, though, weren't they, Shirley,
they
looking
were
back?
Hard days, yes. I mean, my mother, her family, she came from a large family. There were 9 children in her family. And that was strange because my gran and grandma, that's my mother's parents, lived in a flat above a shop in Icknall Street.
Yes.
And used to have to climb stairs to get to the flat. And grandma lived in one room, grandpa lived in the other because they just didn't get on. Yeah. And John and we would go up the stairs and you could always smell grandpa's smoke from his pipe. Yeah. And the one time who was that? Shirley, John, come and see me when you're finished with things, Grandma. Yes, okay. And the one time we went in, he made us a couple of wooden stools. And we were over the moon, and we suddenly realised he was a nice grandpa. Yeah. It was just that they didn't
get on.
They didn't hit it off. And we only saw Grandma's side.
But poverty had a lot to answer for, Shirley, didn't it?
Yes. It's
how the pressures on people.
Oh yes, it must have been dreadful. I mean, it's bad now, isn't it?
Yeah.
Carl, with unemployment, but in those days, it was hard graft. Most of the jobs were hard graft, unless you were professional and got a skill. But in my family, none had real skills, so it was tough.
Now I know what's happening. People are going to be listening now and they're thinking, can we get Shirley's book?
Yeah, well, we've
you're just thinking about this,
put
aren't
it into
you?
a PDF. I am working on a Kindle version at the moment.
Right.
I'm trying to make sure that we get the same kind of tax advantages as Amazon.
Good manager. He's my manager.
So once you've got that sorted out...
So when I've got that sorted out, we're going to make it available for download.
You'll let me know, wouldn't you? So
I will let you know, Carl, certainly.
Well, Andy, it's been a great pleasure talking with you today. Thank you for coming in.
Yeah.
Shirley, I've
Thank
really
you,
enjoyed you
Carl.
being with us.
I'm glad
I'm glad you're glad.
I did worry. I thought, it's if I hear, and you've been great. That's been wonderful.
It's been a delight having you here.
Thank you so much.
God bless both.
I hope we'll
Thank you
keep
very
in touch.
I'm sure we will.
I'm sure we will.